Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Equalizer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I like the overall message of this episode. People, so in particular, it's not just one person, but it's an entire community trying to fight back against kind of like someone's coming in. This guy, Robert Harrington, is coming in to basically buy up this community because he wants to build stuff. But at the same time, it's like there's one particular voice in the community. His name is Malcolm, who kind of fights that. He fights back against it, and it's like they're trying to like do all these little things to kind of force us out of our home so they can do whatever they want to this place, but we can't let them. And that's kind of a big part of the story, is just kind of like fighting and standing up for what you believe in, that even when things get tough, you gotta persevere, you gotta have hope. And sadly Malcolm dies, but it's staged to look like it was a suicide, but a good friend of his, Crystal, doesn't believe that. Considering who Malcolm was, is like there's no way he'd give in and give up like that. So Robin's looking into it. She ends up taking this case because despite everything, the suicide note and everything making it seem like, hey, this might be just a suicide, but she looks into it, and obviously there's a particular shoe print she finds on the wall, so and notices it doesn't match any of Malcolm's shoes, so she brings this back. It's like the particular shoes are like a 2K shoe, which I love. Harry being like, 2K for shoes, oh my god. He's like but do you think, and Melody's like, no. He's like almost like, yeah, okay, because he was talking about, but those are some hot kicks though. Hey, you think? She's no. She shut that down immediately. He's like, yeah, you're 100% right, honey. But obviously, Robin also uses it as an opportunity, because obviously she ends up confronting, because this has to deal with one of the local gangs, the Bombers, and their leader, Kenya, who's obviously kind of run-ins with Malcolm, essentially. I think her confronting them like that was actually pretty badass. And then, not only does she roll up, she talks mad shit to one of the dudes. It's like, oh, would you bring your moms here? And she's like, what? Nah, he's too ugly to be my kid. It's like, damn. Also, I was like, is that bike? I'm going to take it. It's like, oh, this bike? Nah, it doesn't come with training wheels. It's like, damn, dude, she's killing you. But also, dude's trying to step to her, and then she pulls, she holds out her hand with she's holding a gun. I'm like, I love that you didn't have to do that. You could have just been cool, calm customer, just hands in pocket. And, Melody do her thing from far away. But it's like, you kind of wanted to do that to show off. And it's like, oh, this, you can't tell? And then she, pretends like she's pulling the trigger. Bam, bam. I'm like, and she holds both hands out like she's got guns in her hands. And, everybody dropped the guns. I'm like, there's still a badassness to it. I still would have thinking but it's Robin made a spectacle of it, because to be fair, I guess it got her an opportunity to get close to Kenya without him realizing what was going on. So she was able to clone its phone. It was interesting when you find out the person she was contacting was Charles. I was scared at first. I was like, oh, is he going? Don't tell me he's the one behind, because you can tell something was definitely up, because he was the one trying to convince Crystal, hey, it's a suicide. The look on his face, he looked a little concerned, but now we understand why, because Kenya. Sadly, Charles, he's been here for a long time. He's actually the community's historian to a certain extent. He took a whole bunch of pictures over the course of that community and shown, stuff from the past and now. But it's like he's been there through so many fights, and at the end of it all, they've always lost every fight. And for him, it's just after so many years of it, you just kind of give up. You kind of lose hope. He lost hope. And so he kind of, I forgot, he probably explained it, but I don't remember how that ended up with him kind of in Kenya's pocket. But it's basically, that Kenya wanted to kind of take control of the neighborhood to a certain extent, because he's getting it back in with this whole situation. We'll get to it soon enough. But for Kenya, he didn't like that Malcolm was causing too much trouble, and he's like, I gave Kenya key to Malcolm's place. He's like, I didn't think he'd kill him. It's like, yeah, well, what did you expect? And it's just like, I think it's just he wasn't thinking really. It was just he was so beaten down and battered by just kind of like, oh, like, you know, I don't have any more fight left in me, despite, you know, Malcolm trying to inspire so many people to continue have that fight. But sadly, Kenya ended up killing him. But I liked how they ultimately ended up, well, Robin, to take down Kenya, ends up joining with Dante, which I love how horny their situation is. It's like, come on, like I brought it up last episode. I'm going to continue breaking up. It's like the Batman and Catwoman thing they got going on, and just her rolling up in the that shower and being like, "Oh, nice glutes," and she's like, "You missed this spot." He's like, oh, "I'll get to it eventually." He's like, "You know, this is like the men's," and she's like, "I noticed." It's like, he's like, "Oh, so no crime's too small," and she's like, "I don't think that's something we got to worry about." I'm like, dude, come on. You guys are super horny. What's up with this? It's super obvious. They're going to bang. Speaking of Batman and Catwoman, Dante and Robin, it's going to happen at some point in time. Some lines are going to get crossed and they're going to bang. It's going to get super complicated later on just because of who Dante is and what he represents, being a cop, and Robin operating outside of the law. But it's like, you know, eventually those two are going to hook up. But I also love her shaming that other dude. Was like, put some damn like shoes on to like walk around in the shower. Like, she's like, you're spreading around fungus. It's like, nasty. I don't know what I think that's so neat about that, because I feel like Queen Latifah brings a little bit of her own personality to. Like I said, I think actors do that with any character whether it's the smallest part of themselves, they tap into something that maybe they don't tap into on a regular basis, or maybe it's just something that's just naturally a part of them. But I feel like there's a little bit of just like the cadence of which Robin has that, like, you like, especially the way she interacts with Delilah, you're like, you know, moms like that. You probably have a mom like that. That it's just like, there's something about what the energy Queen Latifah brings to the role that it's like, it feels so her, you know? That maybe that's just me reading too much into it. But her convincing Dante to work together. And at first I was scared the moment the whole Charles thing happened, because I'm like, why are you meeting out in the open? Shouldn't you be? I should have realized, it's like, of course they're going to be careful about that. That was the whole plan for Kenya to like drop his guard, and he ends up confessing everything. And it's like, oh, you know, I'm going to come after you. Oh man, you're as good as dead. But for Charles, it's like, at least I got my, even if that ends up being the case, at least I got my soul back. He's like, he wanted to do something to, you know, make it right, because even Robin had talked about that earlier. Like, what ends up breaking a community is when people like that come. The easiest way is to go to the weakest link, is to divide us, to turn us against each other. That's the easiest way to kind of bring down kind of a movement like that. And so Kenya gets arrested, but gets a lawyer from Harrington that's like, oh, take the fall for it, because if you do, you'll be looked after at the very least. It's most likely, because they end up talking about later on, his family gets somebody. So it's like, you take the fall for this, your family's looked after forever, so you don't have to worry about it. So, which I even love when Kenya got arrested, Melody and Harry were doing the whole like bad boys singing that, and it's just like Robin's looking like, really, that's what we're doing? They're like, well, yeah. They just kind of they pause because they get kind of embarrassed, but it's like, those two are so damn cute together. But there's not going to be an easy way to take down Harrington, so especially when they end up diving deeper into it, obviously, because it sucks, because Harrington, which I know, it's the actor who plays Nico from Unnecessary Roughness, is kind of like, he's been in other things, but that's like the thing I will always probably associate him a little bit with. But him trying to have that statement of like, oh yeah, like Malcolm, he fought, believed in his community. If you believe in Malcolm, you believe in Robert Harrington. It was like, even Robin called him out, oh, that's BS. Like, you murdered the dude, you got the nerve to throw his name in front of him, and even kind of compare yourself of like, oh, if you believed in what he believed in, I'm here to help with the community and stuff like that. It's like, oh, like, because ladies, like, I haven't had like my lights went out, you know, even though my son was like in the middle of his asthma treatment, I think is what she was saying. And it's like, oh, but he's like, I don't own the electric company, but maybe I should. And it's like, apparently he does. Well, he paid off the people to shut down power. Like, once again, it's like little tactical moves to kind of make people so frustrated and just being like, I just need to get the hell out of this neighborhood if things are going to be like this, you know? Because it was staying and dealing with it is too much trouble when it starts like messing with you on a consistent basis like that. It's like basically, you know, almost like a war tactic of kind of like wearing people down to the point of exhaustion. That's kind of the whole point of it all. But to deal with this, because it turns out Harrington actually has ties to like terrorism, because basically he doesn't believe in what they believe, but they give him room to like build, like make buildings and stuff like that, and they use the money he brings in to buy weapons and stuff like that. So he basically helps fund like a terrorist group in particular, and so Robin ends up trying to use this as an opportunity. It's like, well, got to get the CIA involved, which they're already kind of involved. Which really quickly, I love that whole thing of like, Harry being like, octopuses, is it octopi? He's like, it's octopi. And she's just, because it's like, oh, he's got his tentacles and everything. It was the analogy he was kind of going for. And she's like, they don't have tentacles, they have arms. He's like, really? He's like, well, now you kind of messed up the whole flow. She's like, well, I'm sorry. Continue. He's like, no, the moment's passed. But it turns out, the CIA is aware of that, and obviously that's kind of Robin's gripe with the CIA to a certain extent, that they let certain things slide because it's like he proves to be an asset, and letting him continue what he's doing gives the CIA, I think, an open window into like a lot of the stuff that particular group that he was kind of associated with is up to. So it's kind of like, let the smaller fry do whatever they want to, because we're going for the bigger, more nasty shark in this particular case. But it's also that thing of like letting certain people go just to get at a bigger fry. It's just that was, I think that probably doesn't sit well. Obviously it's probably like a tactic she's used to, but obviously she brings Bishop into this, which he was hesitant, because it's like, hey, why are you even doing this? Because that Malcolm, you didn't even know him. But she's like, do you remember Zurich? And I was like, yeah, we saved the ambassador's son. It's like, I didn't know him either, but it's because it was the right thing. You talk about how crazy I am. Who's a crazy SOB that kind of ran in there with me to do it, So showing you that, like, Bishop has his reservations about kind of going against the CIA, but it's also a thing of like, he doesn't 100% agree with everything that they do either, that he does have a conscience as well. Like, he wants to try, he doesn't just look at it from the company perspective. He has his own, I mean, to be fair, he does have, still has his ties to the company, but he's still just doing his own private thing. So he's not he's not as adherent to them as he used to be. Very much like Robin. I mean, they're both kind of in a position where they kind of have to adhere. He's like, they do their thing, we do our thing. We don't muddy the water unless it's 100% necessary. So they show up at the party, which I also love, like the cutting back and forth between like her setting everything, because it turns out the dude that Harrington was belittling, like, oh, you're an idiot, what are you trying to do, ruin it? It's like, oh, I thought that was his assistant or something, the way you're talking to him, which doesn't justify it either way. But it's like, oh, it's even worse, because it's not like, oh, that's just some random person you're being shitty towards. It's your own son you're being that way towards, kind of treating his son like a failure. And it turns out his dad's kind of toyed with his life. It's like, broke up his engagement. It's like, oh, well, your dad basically paid her to leave you. And it turns out, obviously, he's connected to terrorism, but he's also the one responsible for Malcolm getting murdered. It's like, he's like, but my dad might do a lot of bad things, but he gave me a life. It's like, no, he took a life from, not only yours, but obviously Malcolm's as well. So, but it's like, and I like the back and forth of like, yeah, he's going to say it's impossible, and then hard cut the home dude being like, even if I wanted to help you, it's impossible. I like that cutting back and forth. It also shows you how well she knew this was going to play out. Like, she knew step by step, showed you just how far, like, Robin's got this stuff down to a T, that she's able to kind of lay it down like that. But her and Bishop showing up there, the introductions didn't go down the way they thought it would, because Harrington was kind of like, I don't know you, so I'm not going to work with you. And it's like, I love that they walk out, and then Bishop kind of looks at her, and Robin's like, shut up. He's like, I didn't even say anything. She's like, I know what that look looks like. It's like, all right, we'll have to find some other way to get the key. Oh, you mean this card key? And it's like, all right. And then it's like, okay, so where's his office? Oh, it's on the 42nd or 43rd floor. And he's just looking at her, and she's like, oh, what? And now there's that look. And it's like, come on, let's get to it. So he even had this like James Bondish moment where I love, where he's like, the guy's like, whoa, you're not supposed to be here. He's like, oh, can you hold this for me? And hands him the drink, and then punches the dude and kind of grabs the drink. He's like, oh, sorry, and continues drinking. I was like, that's some badass spy shit. I also loved Harry explaining like, oh, this and that is how this whole thing is going to work, about how you could get all the information off the drive, but it's like, if you're going to be there anyway, just take this flash drive, it would be faster. And I'm like, well, what was the whole point of explaining that whole other aspect if you're just going to give me the flash drive because you're saying it's faster and easier because I'm going to be there in person? But it turns out, like, I don't know whether that was always like plan A was always going to be what he wanted. This was going to be plan B just in case it didn't work out. I don't know. Because I just thought it was so fascinating that it's like, oh, they get busted, they get thrown out, but then it turns out, his son had, like, there were cameras set up in there to kind of announce it to the world, like, record him and his admittance to all the terrible stuff that he's done, because he's belittling his son of like, oh, you're a coward, oh, did they threaten you, or did you finally grow balls? And he's like, I got this far, but basically tearing whoever I have to tear down. That he's willing to go as far to do whatever he wants, but which obviously with the video and everything, it's like, well, you don't have enough, but it's like, well, luckily they were able to pull everything off the drive, which I love the whole thing of, we went along with Harry's original plan. Like, so that's why I'm saying what was actually plan A and what was plan B, or was it all plan A? Was that the flash drive and everything supposed to just be a distraction? I also love we find out like the cops were like people who work for Bishop, and it's like, I'll see you guys back at the office. But I also love him being like, this was supposed to be like quiet. It's like, she's like, it was quiet. He's like, putting that on the jumbo screen, it's like, yeah, but we needed the people to know this information, because if we just took it on a flash drive and try to hand it over, his lawyers would have it buried, so this way he can't hide from it. It's like, well, the company's not going to be too happy for us getting involved. And she's like, what do you mean? We were never here. And she just walks away. I'm like, okay. We'll see how long that'll necessarily fly before they get too involved. We'll see whether the CIA is like, we know what you've been up to. You can try and keep it quiet, but we know. But I did love that moment between Harry and Melody. I forgot. God, she was saying something, and he took it a little too far. And she's like, yeah, you just had to take it too far. He's like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. He's like, did you know that octopuses don't have tentacles, that they have arms? And she's like, okay, like, what are you talking about? I love that he's still caught up on that, because it's like that broke his mind. I'm like, really? I guess because it's like, I think I would have thought the same thing too. I would have been tentacles. It never would have crossed my mind. It's like, oh, those are arms. Like, it just would have never crossed my mind to think that. But yeah, everything gets resolved at the end. I do like that. Obviously getting justice for Malcolm, but Charles ended up leaving because for him it's like, don't lose hope like I did. I guess for him it's just kind of, I can't be here because I'm kind of responsible for, because he had also talked about, because that's where it played a role in it, was like Kenya was like giving him money or whatever to try and, or rather threatening him or forcing him to basically convince people to leave. And it's like, for him, he feels probably like, not only with Malcolm, but all the people I was telling to leave, like, I kind of turned my back on his community. I lost hope, so they don't need me around to be a constant reminder of kind of the past. Like, it's up to this newer generation, people who are still hopeful, not to lose hope, to keep fighting despite how challenging and hard things can be. So Crystal is the one taking photos now, and she joins up with Harrington's son, who, he was talking about finding a way, because he was kind of the idealist in that he's like, we can find a way to both make money and help the community. We don't have to just focus on one, like just, I'll focus on making money and kind of burn like this community in that regard. It's like, we can do both. We can help this community in very meaningful ways. And so both of them kind of coming together at the end there. And, I love that, like, Dante's like, oh, I like the bike. She's like, I hope you're looking at the license plate. And I mean, like I said, like, you two are so damn horny for each other. I love it. I also love, really quickly, I love that that's the lexicon now, too. The reason I'm saying that, because, like, that's a thing I've heard people say, like, oh, like, I've literally heard someone say, instead of, like, oh, it's good or cool, like, obviously eventually became, like, oh, that's Gucci. It's like, oh, man, that's horny. Kids these days, right? It's crazy. So it's slowly entering my own lexicon of, like, just how, like, my own speech. But still, I mean, in this sense, I'm not talking about in a cool way. I mean, it's just literally like, you two want to bang it out, horny. But regardless, it's a thing of, for him, it's like, if this partnership's going to continue, we got to throw down some guidelines. But she's like, I'm not going to do the whole, to help whoever I want to help by whatever means. I'm not going to wait for permission. It's just like, you got to feel good. Like, it must feel good to kind of like, blur that line a little bit. He's like, oh, you mean cross it? So continuing their back and forth, but it's definitely going to be interesting, continuing to see this partnership grow, and will there fully be guidelines going forward, or will Robin just continue to do what she's doing? We'll wait and see. But another aspect of this episode that kind of goes in line with this is the whole, I thought was kind of a nice thing with the whole Delilah thing, because obviously it's like, oh, like, because for Robin it's like, oh, nothing's ever her fault, and her Aunt Vi is like, you were exactly the same way. What about your dad's conch that he had gotten from Jamaica? But obviously it turns out that other people are having issues with the same pothole. It's like, well, what are you going to do? And so she kind of got it out there and got a whole bunch of retweets, and was able to kind of meet with someone kind of like higher up in the political chain to talk to about this. But it turns out it was a whole photo op thing. Just kind of be like, oh, look, I'm helping this community when I really don't give a shit. Like, it was just, like I said, a photo op just to make them look good. It's just, the optics of it. And for her, she was a little disheartened by it. But at the end of the day, her Aunt Vi as well as Robin were trying to explain to her that sometimes you're going to hit a wall. Like, failing isn't always a bad thing, because failing means at least you try, and trying is the most important thing. And even if you fail, obviously you got to get back up. You're always going to sometimes hit roadblocks in your way in life. The question is, how do you respond to those roadblocks? And so it's like, sometimes there's things like, if someone's not going to do what you want them to do, you got to sometimes do it yourself. So rather than waiting to fix the pothole, wait for someone else to do it, let's do it ourselves. And she was like, you expected them to kind of say no. She's like, I prepared for it as an eventuality, so let's do it. So I thought that was kind of a, nice lesson that she was teaching. But I also thought that was kind of neat. Robin was like, oh yeah, also it was this particular show, it wasn't a conscience. So she's like, her outfit was like, I knew you remembered. So I thought that was kind of a nice, family moment. Obviously, very congruent, that whole lesson being congruent with the what went down in this episode, because I think that's also an angle to it too, because Aunt Vi was saying like how, because Robin was saying like what he believed in some of his messages. It's like, yeah, that's stuff her own dad would say. Like, obviously we haven't gotten into her like family circumstances. Like, I don't know whether that's kind of like her mom and dad aren't around anymore, like what the circumstances are around that. It sounds like they're not, but whether it was like, whether their lives were cut short or whether it was just an old age thing, we don't know. But maybe we'll kind of dive into that more, because it seems like it's implying like, obviously Vi kind of talked about like, it's like, oh, like being able to kind of fight, the fight. Like, obviously they didn't have social media to kind of, help bolster that, to kind of join people together. Social media also gives you an opportunity to kind of get more directly in touch with like officials and government about, fixing stuff. So maybe we'll kind of dive into more of that type of stuff about, Vi's past, as well as stuff about Robin's parents in the future. But I'm really interested to see, ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.